Special operator, worked on the Hill, worked in the Pentagon. I've seen some stuff. I know some things. First question I'm sure that the audience has is, what the hell is Frontier House? On a trip to someplace other than DC, hanging out with the VCs and the investors and the usual suspects, I got on my high horse, my soapbox, if you will. I told them that you cannot change Washington, D.C. by throwing stones from Silicon Valley. And their answer or their response to that was, okay, tough guy, then what do you do? And I said, well, I don't know, but Boeing, Raytheon, and Lockheed have a house right across the street from Capitol Hill where they wine and dine members of Congress on a pretty regular basis. I don't know, maybe go do that. A couple months later, a good friend of mine sent me a Zillow ad. And I said, cool, you're moving your company to D.C.? He goes, no, we're going to go do that house thing. I was like, what house thing? And from that, Frontier House was born. The idea is to give placement, access, competitive edge, and advantage to small companies, startups, veteran-owned businesses that are trying to figure out how to do great things for the nation. Not everybody's a big dummy like I am and is going to put a pack on their back and walk around for 20 years. There's amazing ways to contribute to national security that the nation's innovators, creators, inventors can do. But when the client or when the customer of your product is the federal government, it's not as easy as going out on the street with your MVP and asking people if they want to buy your thing, because the people that actually want to buy your thing don't have money to buy their thing. And there's layers and layers of bureaucracy there. And whether we like them or not, or whether we continue to try to reform them or not, they exist and they're not going away anytime soon. So we set up a forward operating base to remove barriers, to teach, train, educate, put together a community of interest around people who can share best practices, lessons learned, horror stories, war stories, and have a place in DC, because DC sucks. No one wants to be there. It's too expensive. And when you get here, you don't understand it. So we're trying to remove those barriers for the great companies and the great Americans trying to do great things for national security. So Frontier House was born. It exists on Capitol Hill. It is a physical location. It's not some nebulous thing, a group or a foundation. It is an actual physical place. It is one of the closest actual residences to Capitol Hill. 2,000 square feet, has office spaces, think telework, WeWorky kind of stuff. I'm sure that's a trademarked term, but that's fine. It has telework spaces. It has event spaces. We have a podcast studio. We have a conference room, so you can do your corporate fly-ins. And it's just generally an awesome place to come hang out, throw events, and get your ass to DC. If you come once a year, come once a quarter. If you come once a quarter, come once a month, because you need to forge relationships with staff, members, people who work over at the Pentagon, and you're not going to do that over email, I promise you. So Frontier House, frontierhousedc.org. Hit the join us button, become a member. If you're in startup, small, war technology, yes, war tech, I will get into that. Join Frontier House, become a member. It's super cheap. That's basically it. I'll work on my pitch. So out of Frontier House, we have a podcast studio. So as you do, you start a podcast. So as I was thinking about this, I was talking to some of my friends here earlier. There's a lot of geopolitics and let's just be real. One, there's a lot of talking heads out there that are already doing all that stuff, and nobody needs another one of those. So we started thinking through, well, what's actual value add? And we said, well, nobody understands DC, the point of starting Frontier House. So we have a show that we just started. It's called Last Week in DC, which is what the event here is billed as, Last Week in DC Live. And basically, we literally just talk about what happened last week in DC, or on a longer time horizon if I don't get in the seat to record on a weekly basis, which happens. It's new. Hey, give me a break. And we go down White House, Congress, and Pentagon. what's going on, why it's confusing, and trying to basically, one, educate people, but then learn the lingo that makes you effective in Washington, D.C., because it's a completely different language trying to deal with the federal government. So there are people that are looking at me with like the tilted dog head, confused look at this point. Okay, so why is D.C. complicated? If you will oblige me, I'll do a quick state of the nation. Since January of this year, it is October 14th today, since January of this year, we have had an executive order from the White House on cyber innovation, Golden Dome or Iron Dome for America, aka Golden Dome, border and national security, also tied to Golden Dome, unleashing American drone dominance, maritime dominance, some international policy stuff, and a ton, not only on federal acquisition and defense or in general federal reform, but specifically for national security. An executive order that comes out of the White House carries the weight of law until either that president is no longer in the seat and the new person, whoever that is, decides to get rid of it, or Congress enacts it into law as the lawmaking body of our three-branch federal government. We don't teach civics in school anymore, so I feel like I really have to start from the beginning a lot of times. So we have three branches of government. One makes laws. That's not the one that the president is in. But the president, in a lawmaking type fashion, can issue executive orders. There's a lot of executive orders that usually come out of the administration. To see so many that are so national security focused, I would venture to say is unprecedented. In the Pentagon, we have had PPE reform. If PPE, the most ridiculous acronym, doesn't roll off your tongue, you are not ready to deal with the Department of War yet. Planning, programming, budgeting, and execution. It is the bane of everybody's existence. It's the reason why you could find a government customer today who really, really, really wants to buy your thing. Again, that person has no money. Sergeant Mike, when I was back in uniform, wanted all kinds of shit. I remember the first time I went to SHOT Show and I came back, I was like, I need 17 new guns. The person who buys those things is like, okay, stupid, sit down. It takes us 5 years to buy everything. You're like, 5 years to buy everything? Why in the world? Why is that the case? Well, the answer is PPP, planning, programming, budgeting, and execution. It's a 4-year waterfall cycle before they get to spend any money. So if you bring the newest, coolest thing today to like a normal acquisition person in DoD, your best case scenario is 3 years from now. Yeah, no joke. Significant PPP reform activities going on in the Department of Defense to include an implementation guidance on how they're going to get there. We have reform within the Department of Defense on how to buy software. Okay, back in the day, and I don't know how old everybody is that watches this, but like back in the day when I was in the military and I was running our tech program for the Marine Special Operations Unit, we bought Adobe Creative Suite 3 on CDs. You would buy the physical software on CD. Believe it or not, some of those buying practices are still in place of how you would buy a physical thing. Software as a service is getting better. Annual licensing is getting better. But under the new administration this year, we have seen directives coming out of the Secretary's office that look generally like this. Buy software like you would do it as a normal human being in the commercial environment. Signed, Pete. I love this. One page. Do this better, Pete. The mechanism of which they want to do that is called the CSO. Again, if you do not know what a CSO is, you're maybe not ready to deal with the Department of Defense yet. That's why we're here. CSO are commercial solutions openings. They are asking for things that are readily available in the commercial market, and they will buy them in their commercial state today. It's a really great way of the DoD, DOW, putting something out saying we need this and getting a solution. That is now the law of the land for software. It will be bought via CSO. It will be bought using the software pathway in the adaptive acquisition framework. Yup, that's another buzzword you need to know. And they have plans for software integration that will be more enterprise-wide and deliverable, so you can sell your things to the Army, and then, wow, then if the Air Force likes them, you don't have to contract with them too. You can just use the same one and you can buy it. Okay, so lots on software. Down in the services, we saw Army transformation pretty significantly. They started putting out proposals that look a lot more like commercial solutions openings. Like the Army got on board, looked around Ukraine, 3 years into it. Better late than never. And they put out a solicitation that said, hey, if you can make drones and you can make 10,000 of them a year, and they're less than $2,000 a pop, come talk to us. That's how I want to see everything. I want to buy the next F-35 like that, right? Like, hey, if you can do a thing that meets this basic criteria, give me a call. Well, we're moving there with software. We're moving there with the first-person view drones, the small ones that, are basically a step up from, hobby drones that are basically the deciding factor in the war in Ukraine. And will be in all modern war going forward. These aren't going away. This isn't a blip on the radar. The Army has realized that, and they're moving out. We've seen more on drones. We've seen an establishment of Task Force 401. That is the DoD's embodiment of the executive order for Golden Dome to do counter UAS. They have a task force that is dedicated to counter UAS. And our favorite in Congress. So I'm going to get on my soapbox here for a second. So we've seen a lot of mirroring of the executive orders and the DoD implementation, which is great. We've seen legislation submitted in Congress for things like Golden Dome and other reform initiatives, which is awesome. But Congress really takes their time to do things. In the strategic environment that we have right now, where the 2027 clock, the battlefield 2027 clock is still ticking, we don't have time for Congress to do all the heavy lifting because they like to take their time. Again, because we don't teach civics in school anymore. In Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, amongst other things, this is the section of the Constitution that says Congress has the authority to decide if we go to war or not the president, right? Article 1, Section 8. Amongst other things, because it's a large section, it says, Congress shall govern the rules of land and naval forces. That comes to life in the National Defense Authorization Act every year. Congress tells the DoD what to do. In this year's NDAA, we have seen some really, really incredible things for Department of War and national security in general. There were 2 provisions added to the bills in each chamber. In the House, there is the SPEED Act, and in the Senate, there is the Forged Act. Typically, standalone bills don't have such a highlighted presence in the NDAA. They're massive bills, 7,000 pages. And they're usually all-encompassing, kind of start to finish. This time, the specific reform initiatives were pulled out. If you have not read the very specific provisions that come in the Speed and Forged Act, you should, because this is where a lot of the reform initiatives that people have been working on for, arguably, if not years, decades, back to 2015 when Ash Carter started the Defense Innovation Unit Experimental, DIUX, back in the day. A lot of this is coming to life in these specific provisions of the Speed and Forge Act. So the House has passed their NDAA. The Senate has passed their NDAA, and now they move to conference. Again, how a bill becomes a law. Each chamber passes their own bill, then they go to conference, they make them look the same, and then they send it to the president. Well, then they vote on them again with the mirrored bills that are exactly the same, and then they go to the president's desk. Okay. They're getting ready to go to conference on the NDAAs. Both the NDAs are awesome. They have lots of really great things in them, and I look forward to that getting passed. Here's the problem. All my love to my friends who work on the authorizing committees and the armed services committees. The biggest problem, and I don't know if sometimes it's just not knowing. I won't say ignorance. That seems derogatory. Sometimes it's just not knowing. Sometimes it is blatant misinformation by the defense rags and everybody else here in DC who pretends that they know what they're doing, and they don't always. The NDAA, for whatever reason, has numbers in it. Dollars, line items. Those are monopoly money. The NDAA does not fund the government. Go back and watch every defense rag. When the NDAA comes out, they're like, oh, the defense budget's going to be $1 bazillion trillion because the NDAA passed. False. Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution says no funds will be drawn from the Treasury without the appropriation of Congress. We have an appropriations committee. Everybody says that Congress has the power of the purse. Kinda. There are actually only two committees in Congress that actually have anything to do with money and have the legal authority to do anything with money. That's the Appropriations Committee, who has the ability to spend money on behalf of the U.S. taxpayer, and the Ways and Means Committee, who has the ability to create a tax. That's it. Congress's power of the purse is in two committees. Until the Appropriations Act is passed, that's not real money. It's monopoly money. The Appropriations Committee, governed by the 1974 Budget Control Act, says 12 appropriations bills must be passed by the end of the fiscal year. The fiscal year ends on September 30th at 23:59 and 59 seconds. Today's October 14th, ladies and gentlemen. We have not passed 12 appropriations bills. So, lots and lots and lots of really great things coming out of the White House, the department, and the Congress in regards to all of the things that will, one, secure our nation, two, make it easier to work with the government, and three, hopefully continue to expand this ever-growing call to national security. Over the last 3 years, we've seen hundreds of companies started and billions of dollars of private investment through VCs and PEs and now institutional capital into the defense sector in a way that has never happened before. And it's phenomenal. Lots of good things have happened since January. The state of the nation up until September 30th at 23:59 and 59 seconds was great. So here we are today, October 14th. We have not passed the appropriations bill. So Congress, if no funds will be drawn from the Treasury without the appropriation of Congress, well, what happens if they don't do that? Well, let's ask this another way. What happens if the NDAA does not pass? The Department of War just does whatever they want. There are government agencies that haven't been reauthorized in 20 years. The State Department hasn't been reauthorized in like 20 years. They just do whatever they want. Congress isn't passing the State Department Authorization Act, so it's not telling the State Department what to do, and it can just do what it wants. Well, when you don't pass an appropriations bill, you get a government shutdown. So typically in lieu of a government shutdown, we do a continuing resolution. Continuing resolutions by law allow the government to continue operating under whatever guidelines they determine in the CR, the continuing resolution. You want to learn the lingo of DC, it's called the CR. And they typically pass a continuing resolution because somebody said this the other day. Geez, I was trying to remember this one. The last time we passed a bill on time was 17 years ago. I want to say that's the right number. It's been a long time, and we are really bad at doing this. So you pass the CR. So there's a CR that's been passed in the House, but again, how a bill becomes a law, we need to remember how all these things happen. The House has passed the CR. And then it goes over to the Senate, and the Senate can decide to either pass that bill without changing it, or they can change it, or they can write their own, and then they can conference it and figure it out. But that's not happening. So when you don't have a continuing resolution and it's October 1st, you get a government shutdown. What does that mean? It means literally the government shuts down. They send home every employee who is literally not responsible for making sure our country doesn't collapse, and they wait around for Congress to do its job. And that's where we're at today. There's a whole bunch of stuff. There's a whole bunch of bills. Like, I'm not going to get into the politics of it. That's not my job, right? There's like a lot of people who can tell you why things are happening politically. I can tell you that they have not passed an appropriations bill. Therefore, we're in a government shutdown. Therefore, nothing is happening in the DoD. This really starts to cause some problems for the community that we all care about, for national security. And from a Frontier House perspective, this is really the worst situation you could be in a government shutdown, because not only are things not happening. So in a continuing resolution, you can spend the same money that you spent last year, typically. So if your thing was funded last year, you can keep spending that. It causes issues with new starts. If you got a new program started and you're waiting for your money to start, you can't do that under a CR. But in a government shutdown, there are literally no contracting officers. There are no people to execute the money that we have on contract right now. So if you've even got old things that you need functions of the government to happen, those aren't happening either. Causes a lot of issues for people, for companies, for a community that's really still generally trying to figure out how to deal with the government, and don't have multiple funding lines and multiple streams and a huge bankroll like Boeing, Lockheed, and Raytheon. Maybe not Boeing. They got all kinds of problems, but like all the big primes, they can float a couple months of a government shutdown. Small companies can't. So one more issue before I go to the cheerier side of the presentation and talk about what the hell we should do about this, is something near and dear to many people's hearts in the small business and startup world, which is SBIR. So the Small Business Innovation Research Program, America's Seed Fund, if you will, has to be reauthorized. So now we go back to the NDAA, you go back to your authorizing bills. This is where the authorizers really do play a huge role. You have to reauthorize certain programs. NDA or SBIR is one of them. When I was working in the Senate 2 years ago, we did SBIR reauthorization. It was a back alley knife fight even back then, trying to get the program reauthorized. There are legitimate complaints about it, that it is some kind of slush fund to research companies, pejoratively referred to as cyber mills, that have business models that just do research for the sake of research and never transition programs, and they never go anywhere, and they never turn into programs. And that's a problem when you call it America's Seed Fund. America's Seed Fund should be growing companies, not maintaining research and development organizations. We have different funding of which they can go get those. Cool. CCP penetration of the SBIR program is a huge issue. Adversarial penetration of it just in general, and the litany of other issues. Well, Senator Joni Ernst, who is the chair of the Small Business Committee in the Senate, has introduced her Innovate Act, which seeks to reform all of the problems that are currently in the SBIR program. Well, that bill did not pass. Therefore, since 2 years ago, when we took up cyber reauthorization last time, nothing has been reformed. At this point, they are not moving forward to reauthorize SBIR. Will this get fixed? I hope so. How? I don't know. I can tell you from Senator Ernst's side of I'm not speaking for Senator Ernst, but I did work for her 2 years ago and went through this fight. I can tell you that there's probably going to have to be some significant reform before it gets passed because of the concerns in the program. But that's neither here nor there. The problem is small companies and startups typically get their first government money through SBIR. If SBIR ceases to exist, I'm not exactly sure what the front door is for your first million of R&D money with the DoD. Hopefully program offices get a lot better at OTAs. Hopefully they get better at using other creative tools. But the fact of the matter is that SBIR funds $3 billion of small business research grants every year. And yeah, okay, a lot of them go to the same people because they've built a business model around it. But there's a lot of people sitting here today that was their first contract, and they're real companies that want to be real big companies and want to grow and scale. And it does help. And without that, I don't know what that looks like. So SBIR, not a thing. So no new SBIR grants are getting cut at this point. 14 days into the fiscal year, there are no 26 SBIR programs. They have all been stopped indefinitely. And if you have a 2025 fiscal year, SBIR, brief pause, colors of money. The DoD operates on colors of money. It's the most ridiculous thing ever. They have different pots of money that they can spend on different things. Operations and maintenance, research, development, testing, evaluation, procurement, military construction, and military personnel funds. Seems logical enough until you put it into practice. This is like saying, oh, we have a vacation fund. Cool. And we have an emergency fund. Cool. Well, there's a big hole in the roof. Our emergency fund does not cover the new roof. We should probably tap into the vacation fund and fix said roof. No, you cannot. That vacation money is vacation money. Deal with your leaky roof. That's how the government operates, ladies and gentlemen. Colors of money. You have to go back to Congress and do what is called a reprogramming action if the money that you want to move from one color of money to the other is more than $15 million. That's not it's an easy process. It's the chairman and ranking member sign off on it, but like getting it there and staffing it, it's a multi-month long process to fix your leaky roof. SBIR is 2-year money. Research and development is 2-year money. The 25 SBIRs that are currently executing could potentially be at risk for stop work. If they're not fully obligated yet, you might not get the full amount. Or what hit the news late last night is that the department or the White House wants to pay the troops. Thank you. I think the troops should be paid. Somebody who spent 20 years in uniform appreciates when we pay our troops. I've lived through a government shutdown before. I was deployed, I think, to Iraq or Afghanistan during a government shutdown. It's nice to get your paycheck when your family's back at home and depending on you. I absolutely think we should pay the troops. Do not confuse that for what I'm about to say. But the news got launched last night that $8 billion, which by the way, is like a month of pay. Like we rack up like $200 billion a year in military personnel funds. Like $8 billion is like a month of pay. That they've identified $8 billion in RDT&E funds that they're going to pay the troops with. So first, that's an Anti-Deficiency Act violation. If you can't use R&D dollars to fund military personnel, you have to go do a reprogramming action. Fine, great. Go back to Congress. Tell Congress you want to move the money. They'll let you move it. But the question is, where did you find $8 billion of unobligated RDT&E money? That's a lot of money. Even for the DoD, that's a lot of money. $8 billion. SBIR's a $3 billion a year program. I'm not saying I know anything that I'm not supposed to know, but like, I can count to 8, and if you need to get to 8, and SBIR is 3, and it's not reauthorized, and nobody seems to really being like in the DOD making a big stink about reauthorizing it, maybe that's the pay for it. I don't know. We'll see in the next couple days as that comes out. I don't typically like to make predictions, but if you watch this a week from now and 25 SBIR dollars have been shut off too, at least they went to a good cause. All right. So that's the state of the nation as we're at today. That's the year in review. Lots of good things. And then we have just hit a landmine in the last 2 weeks, and we are in a not so great situation. Okay, so the one thing about the government shutdown that we're in right now, typically this is where the world's on fire, national security's in jeopardy kind of talking points start happening. Well, there are billions of dollars in reconciliation that were already approved for the DOD. That's where a lot of like the Golden Dome stuff is going to happen early on. That's executable. So there is money that's going to be spent. It's just not the 26 money or the 25 money. It's the reconciliation. How much of that the DOW wants to spend is still up in the air. 25 and 26 money are discretionary. Reconciliation is mandatory spending. That does not get backfilled. If they start using that money, that's gone and it's gone forever. Let me be very clear about reconciliation. This is a once in a lifetime investment in national security. The billions in reconciliation will never happen again. We're not going to see this. We're not going to see this again. This isn't a yearly thing where it's like, oh, we used to have OCO money, overseas contingency operation money. Like, it was like, oh, hey, we have the defense budget, and then we have this whole other pot of money that we use for like war stuff. That's not a thing. This isn't reconciliation. We're not going to see billions and billions every year in addition to the defense budget. That's just not going to happen. So they have a hard choice to make if they dip into that to deal with things that they should be executing under normal discretionary funds, 25, 26, CR, not CR, whatever. So those are the outliers we have right now. Is where did they find $8 billion in RDT&E, and is that going to come from SBIR? And if this shutdown continues on, do they start dipping into the reconciliation money to pay for things that are not generally what they were intended for? Those things I can tell you I don't know about. Okay. So now, going with the old Colin Powell paradigm here. Tell me what you know, tell me what you don't know, then tell me what you think. So we know what we know. Year in review, it's been good all the way up until about 14 days ago. What I don't know is the two things I just said. And SBIR, is that in jeopardy? And how do they deal with a prolonged government shutdown? Is it reconciliation? We'll see. All right, now on to maybe some more of what I think and the value add of basically why I get up here and run my mouth once a week or so, is to kind of provide some insight for, okay, cool story, but what the hell do I do about that? I'm a small business. I'm an investor. I want to be in defense, but everything that you just said is Greek. What do I do now? All right. So first and foremost, my note here says art and science. There is an art and science of dealing with the federal government, specifically the Department of War. The science of it is understanding PPB, budget, acquisition, contracting, understanding how to read a J-book and how to read the defense budget. That's the science of it. You need to know the science of it. But this administration, as I have just noted in depth, is moving incredibly fast, and none of this shit, reconciliation, the Golden Dome, the Indo-PACOM stuff, the Hellscape stuff, the Replicator stuff, none of this is in the budget. So you need to like watch the bouncing ball every single day and literally listen to tweets, because policy is made on tweet now. And if you are not following the president and the Secretary of War and all of the leaders in the DoD, you are going to literally miss things because they're not in the budget. They're not in policy yet. The new National Defense Strategy is not out yet. It's coming and you should read it, and we'll talk more about that. But like, you need to follow tweets. Okay. That's the art, is figuring out how you fit into the tweet of the day. It'll be in the budget one day. It's not right now, I promise you. And this is the ramblings of a madman. I understand, but my general what to do advice for small businesses trying to operate in the Department of War right now under the 2027 Battlefield 2027 timeline is speed. Speed, speed, speed. There is over $3 billion to $5 billion set aside for Indo-PACOM to deal with the CCP problem that is going to be executed in the next 24 months. Okay. That doesn't have time. You don't have time to catch up with the budget. You don't have time to catch up with the PPP cycle. Everything's operating outside of that. If you think you have part of the solution to the CCP problem in Indo-PACOM, you need to move fast. How does that happen? B2B. B2B is the way to be. I'm telling you that right now. From tagging up with somebody to get on their contract vehicle that's already executing, to finding integration partners, to bringing full up solutions, the DOW does not have time to put the Legos together. You bring them an all up solution put together by 4 or 5 partners. Maybe one of them already has an OT and a contract. You are setting yourself up for success via speed. We are on a time crunch. If you can't deliver in the calendar year of 2027, Battlefield 2027, you are now in the bucket of capabilities for generational modernization programs that are going to deliver outside of the threat window, and you are generally deprioritized unless you are the F-47, the Columbia-class sub, or the next nuclear missile. You don't want to be on that side of the conversation. To get in the game right now, to deal with Indo-PACOM, to deal with Golden Dome, speed is the key. Partnering, B2B is the key. Period. Full stop. I promise you, you will not regret finding partners and getting to the table faster. The new NDS is coming out. When I tell people to work on their strategic communications, when we talk about media, marketing, advertising in the government, but specifically for the Department of War, it's different than the commercial market because you're not selling to some random buyer with a random commercial where you can do these big marketing pitches. You're really selling to like individual human beings who make the buying decisions for the government. It's less like going out on the street and trying to sell your widget on the street corner. And it's more like trying to deal with the buying agent for Walmart. If you want your things on the shelf at Walmart, you need to talk to the Walmart buyer who buys for all of them. It's the same as that. You have to speak to that buyer. That person's first name is PEO, Program Executive Officer, and his buddy, PM, Program Manager. Everybody wants this mythical program of record. I need to be a program of record. Most people have no idea what that means. It means it is a thing that lives in the budget that you can find in the J-books, that is run by a program executive officer and a program manager for a program of record. You need to speak to them. When we talk about strategic communications, information operations, PSYOPs, call it whatever you want. You're speaking to that person. That person speaks a very specific language. That specific language starts in the White House. Oh, look, the whole thing's coming together now, right? We have a government that has three branches. The executive branch is basically the CEO of the country, and they set the strategic guidance. Congress tells them what to do, and then they execute, but the guidance and the vision and the language comes out of the White House. It starts with a little document called the National Security Strategy. Okay? Under the first Trump administration, everyone said, lethality, lethality, everything's lethality. Under the Biden administration, it was called deterrence. It doesn't change. The number one threat to the United States from foreign adversaries outside of the southern border drug problem of fentanyl that kills 70 to 100,000 Americans a year, that aside, put that in the domestic bucket. The foreign threat that we have is from the Chinese Communist Party and their encroachment on Taiwan, a free and sovereign quasi-nation, but the home for all of our advanced technology, where we go back to, VHS and 8-track if China captures all of the technology and intellectual property of Taiwan. So that starts at the White House with the national security strategy, then goes down to the national defense strategy. We're waiting on the new national defense strategy to come out. Things have been leaked about the national defense strategy. Your website, your talking points, your white papers, your commercials, your videos, your everything should be aligned with the national security strategy, the national defense strategy. That goes down into the national military strategy, which is written by the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. If your service writes a strategy, who is your customer? Like the Marine Corps. I was a Marine. Force Design 2030. If you're trying to sell a tank to the Marines today, you've missed the boat. They don't have them anymore. Force Design 2030 changed that pretty significantly. You need to track these strategies, and you need to align your message to your customer. And yes, that's a huge pain in the ass. Every 4 years or so, you're going to have to redo your website. When? If you're talking about the last administration's docs with this administration, no one's going to listen to you. Sorry. The men and women that are in uniform, that are doing the things, that's great. They have bosses. We have a civilian-run military, and the political appointees that sit on top of these people do not want to hear the last administration strategy in your pitch deck. They want to hear theirs. Speak to your customer the way they want to be spoken to. In this national defense strategy, because DC leaks like, I don't know, something that leaks, old pirate ship or something, the draft national defense strategy will prioritize U.S. homeland first. I didn't say the national security strategy. I said the national defense strategy. The DOW strategy will prioritize homeland defense, Golden Dome, protecting our skies, air domain dominance executive order. Wow, big surprise. All of this stuff is nested. One thing leads to another. And then Indo-PACOM will come after that. Because guess what? Nothing has changed. China's still an asshole. Mirror the NDS. Go back, get with your comms team. If you don't have a comms team, and you're like some of the CEOs that are sitting in front of me right now, they're like, bro, I have like 5 people in my company and I am the comms team. Change your website. Call your web designer. Say, hey, this used to say deterrence. It needs to say lethality. And they're like, what does it matter? You say, shut up, comms guy, and change the website, because it matters. Because if you're not saying lethality, if you're not saying warfighter, if you're not saying Department of War, you are no longer in line with your customer. And the last thing I will tell you, from conversations with our great partners and friends over at the department, I like the War Department better. Department of War is clunky. If we're going to go back in time, let's go full 1940s and go War Department. But anyways, nobody asked me. When we talk to our partners, the leadership over at the Department of War, the biggest thing for small businesses, startups, anybody trying to get into this game, that is a non-negotiable going forward. Non-negotiable. Cybersecurity. Everything in the Internet of Things, even in the DoD, the Department of War. I see, I almost did it too. You guys got to be up on this. Like, you have to have like a swear jar. Like if you say Department of Defense, you got to put $1 in there. You have to be cyber secure. The Internet of Things is very much real in the war tech world as well. You cannot be vulnerable. You need to lead with cybersecurity. CMMC is a real thing. First phase of implementation starts in November. You have to be cyber secure. You will not be allowed in the ecosystem if you are not. I am telling you right now, put it in your decks. Put it in your brief. Even if you're not fully there, even if you're not fully compliant, at least show that you are aware that this is a requirement and work towards it. Pretending it doesn't exist will get you no-go'd on your solicitations. Cyber is the #1 threat for an integrated JADC2 JFN. More buzzwords. Joint all domain command and control. All the things can talk to all the things. Joint fires networks. All the things that shoot a thing can talk to all the things that talk to all the things. This sounds a lot like the Internet of Things. You cannot be the weak link and they will not let you in if you are. Cybersecurity needs to be a top priority. And that wraps me right back to the first thing that I said. What was the first EO we saw this year? Cyber. It is very, very serious. You need to read your EOs. You need to read your strategies. You need to know what the administration is saying. You need to follow them on Twitter and you need to align the business to the customer of the day. The more you learn, the more you know, the more you'll be able to sell, the faster it'll work, and this will be less painful. Is it ever going to be easy? No. But this understanding makes it a whole hell of a lot easier. We can't fix all the problems. But if you pay attention to this stuff, at least you're not getting dinged for stupid things you should have known. Not being in alignment with public records and direction of your customer is like, I don't know, trying to sell me hair care products. Know your customer. On that note, I went way longer than I thought I was going to go. It takes a long time to go over a year. I'd say it's been a very active year. What's our time?
I think we're capped at time, but Adrian was saying that we're maybe one question.
All right. Who's got a question? Who's got a question? I've been told I have time for one. Yes.
Kind of already answered it. I was wondering if you had one piece of advice for a defense startup that just raised capital, what advice would you give them?
The question was, what is one piece of advice you have for a defense tech company, a war tech company that just raised capital? Hire people who know this shit. You created something super cool in your dorm room at Stanford, and it's awesome. Congratulations, I can't make that thing. The second you raise money and you have enough to hire your DC team for business development, for government relations, for regulatory, for compliance, for all of the things that just sounded like a foreign language, hire those people. It is a pathway to success and it is a road to failure. If you do not have people on your team who know how to navigate this, outside consultants are great. Many people do that work and it's awesome. That 1099ers are a Band-Aid. The second you pass your Series A, you need to hire people who know this or you will not have a viable DC market. You will not have a viable federal government market. And I'm telling you right now, if I was sitting on the VC side doing pre-investment due diligence on somebody that was looking at a B round and they did not have a DC team, I'm out for all those reasons. That's it. Last Week in DC. That was like last year in DC. We're at Last Week in DC on YouTube. LinkedIn for Frontier House. Join. follow, do all the things. Battlefield 2027. Thanks for having me. That's all, folks.